Welcome to our deep dive into radical forgiveness.
Hmm.
We're going to be looking at Colin Tipping's book, Radical Forgiveness.
Yeah.
And this is a book that has actually garnered some praise from some pretty heavy hitters. Caroline Myss and Neil Donald Walsh have praised this book, and they're calling it a potentially life-changing approach to forgiveness. So we're going to see if it lives up to the hype.
It's interesting how Tipping really frames this not just as letting go of grudges, but it's a spiritual technology for healing and personal growth. And so he jumps right into this compelling story about his sister, Jill, who's having a rough time in her marriage. Her husband, Jeff, is emotionally distant and favors his daughter, who happens to share a name with Jill, Lorraine.
Talk about a recipe for resentment. So Jill's feeling like a victim.
You're right.
And Jeff is completely denying there's even a problem. What happens next?
Well, here's where Tipping, the radical forgiveness expert, steps in. And he guides Jill to see if this might be a recurring pattern in her life. And wouldn't you know it, Jill uncovers a connection between her current pain and unresolved childhood feelings about her father, who was never very affectionate.
Oh, that's fascinating. So her reaction to Jeff is actually rooted in this old wound from her past.
Mm-hmm.
But how does she move from that realization to actual forgiveness?
Well, she'd always assumed that her father was simply incapable of love. But then she saw him being genuinely affectionate with Tipping's daughter, also named Lorraine. So this was a huge aha moment for Jill, as she realized her perception of her father might have been skewed by her own past hurts.
It's incredible how our past experiences can really color our present perceptions. But I'm curious, does Tipping provide any practical tools for uncovering these patterns?
Yeah. He includes a timeline diagram to visually map out Jill's story and suggests this as a tool for listeners to explore their own repeating patterns. But before diving into techniques, he really lays out these fundamental assumptions of radical forgiveness. And it's important to note, he presents these as perspectives to consider, not absolute truths.
So it's more about encouraging critical thinking than dogma, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of these core assumptions?
Well, some resonate with common spiritual ideas, like the notion that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, or that life is a purposeful classroom for soul growth. And then there's that law of cause and effect, that we create our reality through our thoughts and beliefs. But he also presents a more challenging concept, the original sin, where we, as souls, created the illusion of separation from God.
Whoa, that's a pretty heavy idea.
Yeah.
What are the implications of that belief?
Well, from that original sin, Tipping says, arises the ego. And it's constantly trying to protect us from the guilt and fear stemming from that initial separation. This sets the stage for a deeper exploration of the ego's role, which he tackles from two contrasting perspectives: ego as enemy and ego as friend.
Wait, so the ego can be our friend? That seems counterintuitive to a lot of spiritual teachings, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's what makes this deep dive so interesting. So the ego as enemy view sees it as a separate entity born from our belief in separation from God, acting as our spiritual adversary and keeping us trapped in fear.
So in that view, the ego is like this negative force that we need to conquer.
Right, but then there's the ego as friend perspective, which suggests the ego is a part of our soul serving as a loving guide for our human experience. Now, Tipping acknowledges the complexity here, and he actually prefers to see truth in both definitions, which I think is a really valuable takeaway. It encourages us to look at the ego with more nuance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's not always black and white. But how does this tie back into the idea of radical forgiveness?
Well, Tipping argues that the ego, regardless of which perspective you take, utilizes these mechanisms like repression and projection to maintain that illusion of separation from God and others.
Yeah.
He describes repression as the classic defense mechanism where we bury those painful feelings deep in our subconscious.
And he ties this back to that original sin concept, suggesting that repressing these feelings is rooted in the shame and guilt we carry from believing we separated from God.
Precisely. And then there's projection. He explains how we unconsciously transfer those repressed feelings and judgments onto others, essentially making them scapegoats and perpetuating a victim mentality.
It's like we're trying to get rid of parts of ourselves that we don't like by seeing them in other people.
Exactly. And that brings us to the core of radical forgiveness. What we attack and judge in others is often what we condemn within ourselves.
Okay, that is a powerful statement. So how does radical forgiveness help us move beyond that projection and victim consciousness?
It involves a conscious shift in perception, where we begin to see the perfection in every situation, recognizing that everyone is playing their part in this divine plan. He emphasizes that this isn't about condoning bad behavior, but recognizing the potential for growth and learning in every experience.
It almost sounds like a spiritual conspiracy theory, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
everything happens for a reason, even the bad stuff.
Well, it definitely challenges our conventional way of thinking. Tipping shares some pretty compelling examples. For instance, there's this story of a man wrongly imprisoned for murder who ends up forgiving the father of the girl he was accused of killing. He realizes that the father was actually imprisoned by his own unforgiveness.
Wow, that's some next-level forgiveness. But how do we apply that kind of thinking to our everyday lives with all the little annoyances and frustrations we encounter?
Well, Tipping shares his own experience of feeling like a victim after being scammed. And a friend urged him to practice radical forgiveness. And surprisingly, he ended up feeling grateful for the experience. Grateful. He explains that it shifted his perspective and he saw how the experience led to personal growth.
That's a huge shift. It seems like he's suggesting that even negative events can be opportunities for evolution. But does this mean that we just passively accept whatever happens to us?
That's where the concept of missions comes in. Tipping suggests that we come into this life with specific purposes, to heal ourselves and contribute to humanity's evolution. He uses the example of Janet and her rebellious daughter, Melanie.
Oh, tell me more about that. Parent-child relationships can be so challenging.
Yeah. So Janet was consumed by hatred for her daughter's behavior, but through a Satori breathwork experience, she had a vision of their soul agreement. It revealed they chose their roles before incarnating, agreeing to play out this challenging mother-daughter dynamic for their spiritual growth.
So they were both playing parts in this larger cosmic drama. That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah. And through this understanding, Janet shifted from hatred to unconditional love. And this transformation impacted not only her relationship with Melanie, but also her relationship with her own mother. It's like forgiveness created this ripple effect.
That's incredibly powerful. It seems like Tipping is suggesting that forgiveness isn't just about letting go of anger, but about accessing a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of our experiences.
Exactly. And this understanding of interconnectedness becomes even more profound when he introduces the concept of two coexisting worlds: the world of divine truth, which is like that spiritual realm,
Right.
and the world of humanity, our physical reality.
Wait, two worlds. Is this like a parallel universe situation?
Not quite. Tipping suggests that these worlds differ in vibrational frequency, not location.
Okay.
So we experience both simultaneously. It's like they're layered on top of each other. To illustrate this, he shares this adorable anecdote about the 3-year-old girl asking her newborn sibling to tell me about God. I'm beginning to forget.
That's such a perfect way to describe it. Like, we come into this physical world with a memory of that spiritual realm, though we gradually forget it.
Exactly. And that forgetfulness, he argues, leads to the experiences of fear, separation, and duality that we often encounter in the human experience.
Okay. I'm starting to see how all of this ties together. So how do we bridge the gap between these two worlds? How do we remember that connection to the divine?
That's where Tipping's exploration of energy comes in. He emphasizes the concept of vibration, with love being a high vibration,
Right.
and fear, a low one.
Yeah.
This ties back to the idea of the two worlds coexisting at different frequencies. He even introduces the idea of subtle bodies surrounding the physical body.
Subtle bodies, what are those?
He describes the etheric, emotional, mental, and causal bodies, each with its own energy frequency. And when we repress emotions or have unresolved issues, it creates blocks in these subtle bodies, potentially manifesting as disease in the physical body.
So it's not just about emotional well-being, but our physical health as well.
Exactly. Tipping even shares an example of a friend who healed a severe flu by using radical forgiveness to address an underlying emotional issue.
That's incredible. It really highlights that mind-body connection.
Mm-hmm.
But how does time fit into all of this? Can radical forgiveness actually speed up the healing process?
That's precisely what Tipping argues. He differentiates between traditional forgiveness, which can be a long, drawn-out process,
Right.
and radical forgiveness, which focuses on shifting our perception in the present moment.
So it's about making a conscious choice to see things differently right now, rather than waiting for our feelings to catch up.
Yes. He references studies showing the long-term benefits of forgiveness, but he believes if participants had used radical forgiveness, they would have experienced healing much more quickly.
So it's almost like a fast track to healing.
Mhm.
But does he provide any evidence to support this claim?
While he doesn't offer specific scientific studies to back up the speed of radical forgiveness, he points to the transformative experiences of people like his sister Jill. And he emphasizes that radical forgiveness is ultimately about choosing to see things differently, recognizing that everything, even the challenging stuff, is happening for our highest good. It's about trusting in a larger plan, even when we can't see it.
That's a pretty radical shift in thinking, but I can see how it could be incredibly empowering.
And Tipping takes this even further by suggesting that this shift in perception can actually change our biology, allowing our bodies to heal more quickly and efficiently. He even suggests it can act as preventative medicine, clearing out energetic blocks before they manifest as physical disease.
Preventative medicine through forgiveness.
Yeah.
That's intriguing. Does he dive into any specific examples of how this works?
Yeah. He dedicates a significant portion of the book to exploring the connection between forgiveness and cancer, suggesting that unresolved anger and resentment can contribute to its development. He emphasizes the importance of feeling and processing emotions rather than suppressing them.
So bottling up our anger could actually be harmful to our health.
That's what Tipping proposes.
Yeah.
He shares this poignant story about Jane, a woman with brain cancer, and the location of her tumor was symbolically linked to her repressed grief over a broken love affair. She literally stored away all her pain and heartbreak in a box in the attic.
Wow. That's a powerful image. It really emphasizes how our unprocessed emotions can manifest physically.
Exactly. Tipping highlights the need to confront our pain, acknowledge and release those stuck emotions. And he believes that while traditional cancer treatments are vital, they only address the physical symptoms. True healing, he argues, requires delving into those emotional and spiritual root causes.
So it's about treating the whole person, not just the disease.
Precisely. He sees radical forgiveness as this potent tool for creating an environment of healing within the body.
This is all fascinating, but I'm curious about the practical application of radical forgiveness. What specific tools does Tipping offer to help us put these concepts into practice?
Well, he starts by emphasizing the importance of feeling the feelings, even the uncomfortable ones like anger and resentment.
That seems counterintuitive. Isn't forgiveness about letting go of anger?
It is ultimately. But Tipping argues that we can't heal what we don't acknowledge, and he cautions against using spiritual bypass techniques to avoid our emotions. He actually shares a funny anecdote about a time when he was leading a workshop in England.
Oh, tell me. I love a good story.
Yeah, so this monk bursts into the room, enraged that Tipping hadn't rung the bell to announce his arrival.
Oh my goodness.
It turned out to be a blessing in disguise because it broke through the participants' resistance to acknowledging their anger.
So sometimes even anger can be a catalyst for growth.
Exactly. And Tipping emphasizes that anger is often a secondary emotion, masking deeper feelings of hurt, sadness, or fear. So it's about getting curious about our anger, asking ourselves, what's underneath this?
That makes sense. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion to get to that core issue.
Perfectly put. And Tipping encourages us to engage in what he calls anger work, using physical activity and vocal expression to release those pent-up emotions.
So screaming into a pillow or going for a run when you're angry can actually be helpful.
Exactly. He suggests screaming into a pillow, yelling in the car, or even chopping wood as healthy ways to move that anger energy out of the body. But he also cautions that for those who've experienced significant trauma, it's important to do anger work with a trained professional who can provide a safe and supportive environment.
That's an important reminder. It's not about pushing ourselves beyond our limits, but about finding healthy ways to process our emotions.
Right. Now, one of Tipping's key tools for practicing radical forgiveness is the Radical Forgiveness Worksheet. It's a structured process that guides you through telling the story, feeling the feelings, collapsing the story, and reframing the situation from a perspective of perfection.
It sounds like a comprehensive approach to working through forgiveness. Tell me more about how it works.
So, the worksheet starts with identifying the person you're upset with and describing the situation that's causing you discomfort. It's about getting clear on the specifics of what happened and how you're feeling about it.
So it's about getting those thoughts and feelings out of our head and on paper.
Exactly. Then you identify your true emotions, allowing yourself to feel them fully without judgment. It's about acknowledging the rawness of your emotional experience.
That can be tough, especially when we've been taught to suppress or deny our emotions.
Absolutely. But it's a crucial step in the healing process.
Okay, so we've identified the situation and our feelings. What's next?
The next step is where the real shift in perspective begins. You're asked to recognize that you created this situation for your spiritual growth.
Hold on. Are you saying that we're responsible for everything that happens to us, even the bad stuff?
It's not about blame, but about recognizing that our souls are constantly guiding us towards healing and growth.
Okay.
Tipping suggests that even if we don't understand how or why, there's a reason we're experiencing this particular challenge.
Okay, I can see how that could be empowering. Instead of feeling like a victim, we're actually choosing these experiences for our own evolution. But how do we know what that reason is? How do we make sense of it all?
That's where the worksheet really helps. It guides you to look for clues or patterns in your life that suggest you've had similar healing opportunities in the past.
So it's like those recurring themes or lessons that keep popping up in different forms throughout our lives.
Exactly. Tipping believes these patterns are evidence that our souls are constantly nudging us toward growth. And the worksheet prompts you to identify those patterns, which helps to make sense of the current situation.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. So the worksheet helps us to connect the dots between our past experiences and our present challenges.
Precisely. And then it takes you even deeper. The next step is to identify the specific things the person did or said that upset you and how those actions made you feel.
So it's about getting really specific with those triggers, those moments that really set us off.
Yes. But the key here is to acknowledge and accept your feelings without judging yourself for having them.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our emotions are valid and we don't have to be ashamed of them.
That's so important. We often beat ourselves up for feeling angry or resentful, but the worksheet encourages us to just be with those emotions.
Exactly. And from that place of acceptance, you can then begin to explore the deeper spiritual lesson or message behind the situation. The worksheet encourages you to shift from blame to seeking meaning.
So instead of asking, why did this happen to me?
Right.
We're asking, what can I learn from this?
Precisely. And you're encouraged to look for evidence that the situation might have been perfect in some way, even if you don't fully understand it. It's about opening yourself up to the possibility that there's a bigger plan at play.
That can be a tough concept to grasp, especially when we're in the midst of pain or suffering.
Absolutely. It takes a leap of faith to trust that even the difficult experiences are ultimately for our good. But Tipping believes that this perspective is essential for true healing.
Okay, so we've explored the situation, our feelings, and the potential spiritual lessons. What's the next step in the worksheet process?
The next step is where we really begin to confront the issue head on. You're asked to write a letter to the person you're upset with, expressing all your raw, unfiltered feelings.
So it's like a no-holds-barred letter where we just let it all out.
Exactly. It's a cathartic release, giving yourself permission to express all the anger, hurt, and resentment that you've been holding on to.
That sounds incredibly liberating. But what happens after we've gotten all of that out of our system?
That's where the real transformation begins. The worksheet prompts you to acknowledge that the person is simply mirroring back to you aspects of yourself that you've disowned or denied.
Wait, so the person that we're angry with is actually reflecting back our own shadow self.
Precisely. And this is a crucial insight in radical forgiveness. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of our experiences.
Yeah.
Tipping believes that we attract into our lives people who will trigger our deepest wounds, those parts of ourselves that we've rejected or suppressed.
Okay, that is a mind-blowing concept. It's not about blaming the other person, but about seeing them as a messenger, a reflection of our own inner landscape.
Exactly. And the worksheet guides you to identify the specific qualities or traits that the person is reflecting back to you. It can be a challenging but ultimately liberating exercise in self-awareness.
It sounds like it takes a lot of courage to look in the mirror and see those parts of ourselves that we've been trying to hide from.
Absolutely. But Tipping believes that this is the key to unlocking true forgiveness. When we can see our own shadow reflected back to us, we can begin to have compassion with ourselves and with the other person.
So it's not about condoning their behavior, but about understanding the deeper dynamics at play.
Exactly. And from that place of understanding, you can then begin to reframe the situation from a perspective of perfection, recognizing that everyone involved was playing their part in a divine plan.
So instead of seeing the person as a villain, we begin to see them as a healing angel in disguise.
Precisely. The worksheet guides you to shift your perspective from victim to empowered co-creator.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that even though the experience might have been painful, it ultimately served your highest good.
That's a powerful shift in perception. But I imagine it takes time and practice to fully integrate that kind of thinking.
Absolutely. Tipping emphasizes that completing the worksheet is just the beginning of the forgiveness journey. It's about integrating these new perspectives into our lives and choosing forgiveness as a way of being in the world.
So it's not just a one-time exercise, but an ongoing practice.
Exactly. And tipping offers a variety of tools and techniques to support this practice. But before we move on, I think it's important to highlight one more aspect of the worksheet. The final step is to write a note to yourself, acknowledging your courage in doing this work and offering yourself compassion and support. It's a beautiful reminder to be gentle with ourselves as we navigate this challenging process of forgiveness.
That's such a valuable reminder. Forgiveness isn't about being perfect or achieving some idealized state. It's about being human, about allowing ourselves to make mistakes and learn from them.
Exactly. It's about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of the deep dive. We've explored the core assumptions of radical forgiveness, the concept of missions, the role of energy and the subtle bodies, and we've even touched on the connection between forgiveness and cancer.
And we delved into the powerful tool of the Radical Forgiveness Worksheet, which provides a step-by-step process for moving through anger, resentment, and ultimately towards forgiveness.
Yeah.
Welcome back. So we've been unpacking Colin Tipping's Radical Forgiveness, and you're probably starting to see how it really pushes us to think differently about those challenging situations and even our own health.
Absolutely. In part one, we really focus on those individual aspects of radical forgiveness. But in the book, tipping also explores its potential for healing at a collective level. Groups, races, even entire countries.
Yeah. It's fascinating how he applies these principles to address collective trauma. He's worked with groups like Jewish people who've experienced persecution and witnessed incredible shifts as they let go of their collective pain.
That sounds incredibly powerful. Can you share a specific example?
Well, he talks about his work reconciling the historical conflict between white Australians and Aboriginal people. Tipping argues that a spiritual technology like radical forgiveness is essential to truly bridge that kind of deep-seated divide. He even draws parallels to Nelson Mandela's leadership in South Africa, where forgiveness paved the way for a more peaceful transition out of apartheid.
Mandela's example is so inspiring. He chose forgiveness over revenge, demonstrating incredible strength and a commitment to a brighter future.
Right. Tipping believes that Mandela's approach transformed the energy of the situation, reducing the potential for violence and creating space for healing.
It's a powerful reminder that our choices have a ripple effect, impacting not just ourselves but the world around us.
Right. And Tipping suggests that we can all contribute to this collective mission of transforming that victim archetype by practicing radical forgiveness in our own lives. Remember that idea of seeing perfection in every situation, even the ones that seem tragic or unjust.
Right, recognizing that everyone is playing their part in this larger divine plan.
Yeah,
But honestly, sometimes that's a tough pill to swallow.
I hear you. It requires a real shift in consciousness, moving from judgment to acceptance. Tipping challenges us to see those who might be considered villains as potential healing angels in disguise.
That's a radical concept. So are you saying that even people who intentionally cause harm are ultimately serving some higher purpose?
Well, Tipping proposes that everyone is doing the best they can with the level of understanding that they have at any given moment. And ultimately, he believes that we're all on a journey of spiritual growth and evolution.
Okay, I can see how that perspective could open up space for compassion, even for those who've hurt us deeply. But what about those times when we find ourselves slipping back into old patterns of blame and resentment? How do we avoid getting stuck in that victim mentality?
Well, Tipping acknowledges that our egos might resist the shift towards radical forgiveness. It can be challenging to let go of familiar ways of thinking, even if they're causing us pain.
So what does he suggest we do when we feel that resistance?
Well, first, he cautions against blaming our parents for our current struggles. While our upbringing undoubtedly shapes us, he argues that blaming keeps us stuck in that victim archetype.
He's advocating for taking responsibility for our own healing, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing that we chose our parents and our life experiences for a reason.
Exactly. He also points out that many self-help approaches focus on fixing the past or worrying about the future, which prevents us from fully experiencing the present moment.
It's so easy to get caught up in regrets or anxieties, losing sight of the beauty and potential of the here and now.
Right. He reminds us to come back to our bodies, to be present in our lives. And a key part of that present moment awareness is understanding energy. He explains that our bodies aren't just physical structures, but complex systems of energy fields Remember those subtle bodies we talked about earlier, the etheric, emotional, mental, and causal bodies?
Right, the idea that we have these energy layers surrounding our physical body. What's their role in this process of radical forgiveness?
Well, Tipping explains that unresolved emotional issues and repressed memories can create blockages in those subtle bodies, potentially manifesting as disease in the physical body.
So it's like our emotions literally get stuck in our bodies, creating energy jams that can impact our health.
Exactly. And he even shares the story of Farah Allen, a friend who healed a severe flu by using radical forgiveness to address an underlying emotional issue.
That's amazing. It's a powerful example of how addressing the root cause can lead to healing at multiple levels.
Right. And Tipping believes that radical forgiveness can help clear those energetic blocks before they manifest as physical illness. He suggests it's not just about emotional well-being, but also about taking proactive steps towards physical health.
So it's like a form of preventative medicine.
That's how he presents it. Now he dives even deeper into the connection between time and healing, arguing that radical forgiveness can accelerate the healing process.
We touched on this earlier, the idea that radical forgiveness focuses on shifting our perception in the present moment rather than dwelling on the past. But what about situations where the hurt is very recent or still ongoing?
That's a great question. He acknowledges that traditional forgiveness often involves a long and arduous process of working through resentment and pain. But with radical forgiveness, you're choosing to see things differently right now, recognizing that everything is happening for your highest good.
So it's about making a conscious choice to trust that there's a bigger plan at play, even when we're in the midst of pain.
Exactly. And he argues that this shift in perception can literally change our biology, allowing our bodies to heal more quickly and efficiently. He references research on the benefits of forgiveness, but he believes if the participants had used radical forgiveness, they would experience much faster results.
It's like switching from a horse-drawn carriage to a high-speed train. But does he give us any concrete tools for making that shift, for accessing that present moment awareness?
Absolutely. Remember, we talked about the importance of feeling the feelings. He emphasizes that this is a crucial step in the process.
Right, acknowledging and processing our emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, rather than trying to suppress them.
Exactly. And he cautions against using spiritual bypass techniques to avoid those difficult feelings. He even shares a funny story about a workshop he was leading where a monk stormed in, furious that Tipping hadn't rung the bell to announce his arrival.
That sounds like a scene from a movie.
It was. But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because it broke through the participants' resistance to acknowledging their anger. It reminded them that they couldn't heal what they wouldn't acknowledge.
It's like that saying, what we resist persists. The more we try to push away our emotions, the more they seem to stick around.
Exactly. And Tipping emphasizes that anger is often a secondary emotion, masking deeper feelings of hurt, sadness, or fear. So it's about getting curious about our anger, asking ourselves, what's underneath this? What am I truly feeling?
That's great practice. Instead of getting lost in the anger, we can use it as a signpost, pointing us toward those deeper wounds that need attention.
Precisely. And Tipping provides some practical techniques for processing those emotions, what he calls anger work. He suggests physical activity, like running or dancing, and vocal expression, like screaming into a pillow or yelling in the car. These techniques can help move that anger energy out of the body.
That makes sense. It's like those emotions need a healthy outlet for expression. Otherwise, they can get trapped and create those energetic blocks that we talked about.
Exactly. But he also cautions that for those who've experienced significant trauma, it's important to do this work with a trained professional who can provide a safe and supportive environment.
That's an important reminder. It's about finding what works for you while also honoring your limits and seeking support when needed.
Right. Now, beyond anger work, he offers a powerful tool for releasing resentment and moving towards forgiveness, the radical release letter.
Oh, tell me more about that. I've heard about these forgiveness letters, but I'm curious about how they work.
It's a process of writing a letter to the person you want to forgive, expressing all your raw, unfiltered feelings, no holding back, let it all out on the page.
That sounds incredibly cathartic. But what happens after we've poured out all of our anger and resentment onto the page?
That's where the radical part comes in. You shift gears and reframe the situation from a perspective of gratitude. You're not condoning their behavior, but you're choosing to see the experience as a catalyst for your growth.
So it's like going from a place of blame and anger to a place of understanding and even appreciation.
Exactly. You're acknowledging the pain the experience caused, but you're also recognizing the lessons you learned, the strength you gained, and the ways in which it ultimately served your highest good.
That's a profound shift. It reminds me of the saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But what do we do with the letter once we've written it?
Well, tipping offers several options. You can choose to keep it for yourself, or you can use it in a forgiveness ritual.
Rituals. Tell me more about those.
Well, Tipping believes that rituals can amplify the forgiveness process. He suggests using elements like fire or water to symbolize the transformation you're undergoing. For example, you could burn the letter, releasing the resentment into the flames. Or you could fold it into a boat and send it downstream, letting the water carry away the pain.
Those are beautiful images. It's like giving those heavy emotions a tangible outlet for release.
Exactly. It's about engaging our senses and creating a physical experience that reflects the internal shift we're making.
This all sounds incredibly powerful. But I'm wondering, what about those of us who struggle to express our feelings verbally? Are there other ways to access the benefits of radical forgiveness?
Absolutely. Tipping talks about the power of art therapy for expressing and releasing emotions. He shares a moving story about a woman with multiple sclerosis who used art to unleash her repressed anger and reclaim her voice.
I love that. Art can be such a powerful tool for accessing those deeper emotions that we might not even have words for.
Exactly. Tipping encourages experimenting with different mediums, letting those emotions flow freely onto the canvas or paper. He even suggests creating a series of drawings, starting with those expressing anger and pain, then moving toward compassion and understanding, and ultimately those reflecting radical forgiveness. It's like mapping out your emotional journey through art.
It's a beautiful way to witness your own transformation, to see those shifts in perspective reflected back to you in a tangible way.
And he encourages sharing your artwork with trusted others, inviting their interpretations and insights. It can be a powerful way to deepen your understanding of your own process and to receive support from those you love.
So it's not just about individual expression, but also about connection and community.
Precisely. Now, in addition to art therapy, tipping offers a powerful visualization technique, using the rose as a symbol of psychic protection.
Intriguing. How does that work?
It's about shielding yourself from negative energy without closing your heart to others. It's like creating a safe space for yourself while remaining open to connection. He recommends visualizing a rose at the edge of your aura, especially when you're around people whose energy feels draining or overwhelming.
That's a great tip. I can see how that could be helpful in navigating those challenging social situations.
He even suggests putting up your rose while talking on the phone, protecting yourself from negative energy even in non-physical interactions.
Wow, I never thought about that. It's a reminder that energy is always at play, even when we're not physically present. But how do we actually create this rose visualization?
Well, he offers a guided meditation CD called the Satori Grounding Meditation that teaches you how to ground your energy, balance your chakras, and create your protection rose for the day. It's a powerful practice for cultivating energetic well-being and protecting yourself from negativity.
It sounds like a valuable tool for those of us who are sensitive to energy, or who find ourselves easily drained in certain environments. So we've explored a lot of different techniques for practicing radical forgiveness, from the worksheet to the release letter, rituals, art therapy, and even this rose visualization. It seems like tipping offers a really diverse toolbox for approaching this work.
He does, and he emphasizes that it's about finding what resonates with you
Mhm.
and experimenting to see what works best for your individual needs. But regardless of the specific techniques you use, he stresses that it all starts with self-forgiveness.
Ah, yes. The importance of extending that same compassion and understanding to ourselves that we offer to others. But self-forgiveness can be so challenging, can't it? We often judge ourselves more harshly than anyone else.
Absolutely. Tipping acknowledges that self-forgiveness can be one of the most difficult forms of forgiveness to practice. And he reminds us that we often project our own self-judgment onto others. The people we criticize the most are often mirroring back to us the very qualities we condemn in ourselves.
It's like we're trying to get rid of parts of ourselves that we deem unacceptable by pointing them out in others.
Exactly. And when we forgive them, we automatically extend that same forgiveness to ourselves. It's a beautiful reminder of the interconnectedness of forgiveness.
It's like those ripples we talked about earlier, the idea that our actions have a cascading effect. When we forgive ourselves, we're not just healing our own wounds, but also creating a more compassionate and forgiving world.
Beautifully put. And tipping offers a specific tool for deepening this practice of self-forgiveness.
Oh, tell me more about that. I think a lot of us could use some guidance in this area.
Well, he developed a self-forgiveness workshop called Emergence, which is designed to help people connect with and forgive those parts of themselves that carry guilt and shame. He emphasizes that we often aren't even aware of the ways we're judging ourselves, those unconscious patterns that keep us stuck in cycles of self-sabotage.
That's so true. We can be our own worst critics, replaying past mistakes and holding ourselves to impossible standards.
Exactly. And the Emergence Workshop provides a safe and supportive environment for exploring those patterns and offering ourselves the compassion and understanding we deserve.
It's about reclaiming our wholeness and embracing all aspects of who we are, imperfections and all.
Beautifully said. And Tipping emphasizes that self-forgiveness is not a one-time event, but an ongoing practice. It's about cultivating a habit of self-compassion, of recognizing our inherent worthiness, even when we make mistakes.
That's so important. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend.
Now, beyond the specific techniques and workshops, Tipping emphasizes that radical forgiveness is ultimately a way of life. It's about shifting from a fear-based mentality to one grounded in love and acceptance.
So it's not just about applying these tools in isolated situations, but about embodying these principles in every aspect of our lives.
Exactly. He challenges us to suspend our usual way of thinking and embrace the possibility of operating from a new reality, one where forgiveness is the default setting.
That's a bold vision, but how do we actually make that shift? It's one thing to understand these concepts intellectually, but how do we put them into practice in the real world?
Well, Tipping offers several suggestions. First, he encourages us to become aware of our thoughts and beliefs, particularly those that are rooted in fear, judgment, or blame.
So it's about paying attention to that inner critic, that voice that tells us we're not good enough, that we've messed things up, that we deserve to be punished.
Exactly. He suggests that we begin to challenge those negative thoughts, questioning their validity and choosing to replace them with more loving and affirming beliefs.
It's like retraining our minds to see the good in ourselves and in others. But what about those times when we find ourselves triggered, when those old wounds resurface and we react from a place of anger or resentment? How do we handle those moments?
Well, Tipping reminds us that forgiveness is a process, not a destination. It's about making a conscious choice to see things from a higher perspective, even when our emotions are pulling us in a different direction. He suggests using affirmations, visualizations, or even taking a few deep breaths to calm the nervous system and shift our energy.
So it's about having a toolkit of techniques that we can use to navigate those challenging moments.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the importance of practicing these techniques regularly, even when we're not feeling particularly triggered or resentful.
It's like building a muscle, strengthening our capacity for forgiveness so that it becomes more and more accessible over time.
Beautifully put. And he encourages us to be patient with ourselves in this process, recognizing that transformation takes time.
This all sounds incredibly empowering. But I'm wondering, what does Tipping have to say about the connection between forgiveness and spirituality? Is radical forgiveness tied to any particular religious beliefs?
That's a great question. Tipping presents radical forgiveness as a spiritual technology, but he emphasizes that it's not tied to any specific religion or dogma. He believes that the principles of radical forgiveness are universal, accessible to people from all walks of life, regardless of their spiritual or religious beliefs.
So it's more about a way of being in the world, a shift in consciousness, than about adhering to any particular set of doctrines.
Exactly. He sees radical forgiveness as a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual realm, allowing us to access the love vibration of the fourth dimension while still existing in the third dimension.
Wait, fourth dimension? Is he talking about time travel or parallel universes?
Not quite. He's using the term dimension metaphorically to describe different levels of consciousness. He suggests that the fourth dimension is a realm of higher awareness characterized by peace, joy, and unconditional love.
So it's like tapping into a source of infinite possibility, a state of being that transcends the limitations of the physical world.
Exactly. And he believes that radical forgiveness offers a pathway to accessing that higher realm while still living in our human bodies.
That's a powerful concept.
Yeah.
But how do we actually bridge that gap between the physical and the spiritual? Does he offer any specific techniques or practices for accessing that fourth dimension?
He suggests that the practice of radical forgiveness itself is a form of bridging dimensions. When we choose to see through the eyes of love, when we release resentment and embrace forgiveness, we're aligning our energy with that higher vibrational frequency.
So it's like we're shifting our perspective from the limited ego-driven reality of the third dimension to the expansive heart-centered reality of the fourth dimension.
Beautifully put. And Tipping believes that this shift in consciousness can have a profound impact, not just on our individual lives, but on the world as a whole.
It's a beautiful vision, isn't it? A world where healing and transformation are not just possible, but inevitable.
Absolutely. And he challenges us to be the change we wish to see in the world, to be living embodiments of radical forgiveness, radiating love and compassion into every situation we encounter.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far. We've explored so many facets of radical forgiveness, its impact on individual and collective healing, its connection to energy and the subtle bodies, the practical tools and techniques, and even its potential for bridging dimensions. But there's still so much more to uncover.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll wrap up our exploration of Colin Tipping's radical forgiveness, diving deeper into the power of self-forgiveness and exploring some final thoughts and takeaways to help you integrate these principles into your own life.
Welcome back to our deep dive into radical forgiveness. We've really been covering a lot of ground, exploring the individual and collective applications of this spiritual technology, the role of energy, and some really powerful techniques like the Radical Forgiveness Worksheet and the Release Letter. But before we wrap up, I'm really eager to hear more about self-forgiveness. It feels like the foundation for everything else we've been discussing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Tipping dedicates a significant portion of the book to really emphasizing the importance of self-forgiveness, recognizing that it's often the most challenging form of forgiveness to practice.
Why is that? Why do we find it so difficult to extend that same compassion to ourselves that we offer to others?
Well, Kipping suggests that our struggle with self-forgiveness stems from those deeply ingrained patterns of self-judgment. We tend to hold ourselves to these impossible standards, replaying past mistakes, focusing on our perceived flaws. And he reminds us that we often project our own self-judgment onto others, criticizing in them the very qualities we condemn in ourselves.
It's like we're trying to distance ourselves from those undesirable aspects of our being by pointing them out in others.
Exactly. But the truth is, by judging others, we're only perpetuating our own suffering. And Tipping offers this really powerful reminder. When we forgive others, we automatically extend that same forgiveness to ourselves. It's a beautiful illustration of the interconnectedness of forgiveness.
That makes so much sense. It's like those ripples we talked about earlier, the idea that our actions have this cascading effect. When we choose forgiveness, we're not just healing our own wounds, but also contributing to a more compassionate and forgiving world. But what about those times when we feel like we've truly messed up, when the guilt and shame are so overwhelming that self-forgiveness seems impossible?
Tipping acknowledges that there are no quick fixes when it comes to self-forgiveness. It's an ongoing practice, a commitment to showing up for ourselves with kindness and understanding, even when we feel like we've fallen short. And he really encourages us to be patient and compassionate with ourselves in this process, recognizing that healing takes time. He even offers a specific workshop called Emergence, which is designed to help people connect with and forgive those parts of themselves that carry guilt and shame.
That sounds incredibly valuable. It's like creating a safe space to explore those deeper wounds and to offer ourselves the love and acceptance we deserve. But beyond attending a workshop, are there any simple practices we can incorporate into our daily lives to cultivate self-forgiveness?
Absolutely. Tipping suggests several practices. First, he encourages us to become aware of our self-talk, noticing those critical and judgmental thoughts that arise throughout the day.
So it's about paying attention to that inner critic, that voice that tells us we're not good enough, that we've messed things up, that we deserve to be punished.
Exactly. He suggests that we gently challenge those negative thoughts, questioning their validity, and choosing to replace them with more loving and affirming beliefs.
It's like retraining our minds to see the good in ourselves, even when we make mistakes.
Precisely. And beyond changing our self-talk, he encourages us to engage in practices that nurture self-love and compassion. This might involve spending time in nature, engaging in creative activities, or simply treating ourselves to something that brings us joy.
It's about remembering that we are worthy of love and care regardless of our past mistakes or perceived imperfections.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that self-forgiveness is not about condoning harmful behavior or letting ourselves off the hook. It's about recognizing that we are all works in progress, capable of learning and growing from our experiences.
That's such a powerful message. It's about embracing our humanity, with all its flaws and imperfections, and choosing to see ourselves through the eyes of love and compassion. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, does tipping offer any Any final thoughts or takeaways to help us integrate these principles of radical forgiveness into our lives?
He does. He reminds us that radical forgiveness starts as a lie.
A lie. What does he mean by that?
Well, he's emphasizing that we don't have to wait until we feel forgiveness in our hearts to start practicing it. We can choose to act as if we've already forgiven, trusting that the feelings will follow.
So it's about taking action, even when we're not feeling particularly forgiving.
Exactly. It's about choosing to see the situation through a different lens, even when our ego is screaming at us to hold on to that resentment.
It's a powerful reminder that we have the power to choose our perspective, to choose love over fear, forgiveness over resentment.
And he leaves us with this final message of hope and encouragement. He reminds us that forgiveness is a process, not a destination. It's about showing up for ourselves with compassion and understanding day after day, moment after moment.
It's about embracing the journey with all of its twists and turns and trusting that each experience, whether joyful or challenging, is ultimately guiding us towards greater wholeness.
Beautifully said. And he reminds us that we don't have to do this work alone. There are resources available, communities of support, and teachers and guides to help us along the path.
This has been an incredible journey into the world of radical forgiveness. We've explored the profound impact it can have on our lives, our relationships, and even our physical health. We've delved into practical techniques and practices for cultivating forgiveness, and we've even glimpsed the possibility of bridging dimensions and accessing a higher realm of consciousness. But ultimately, the most important takeaway is this. Forgiveness is a choice. It's a choice we can make in every moment, no matter what challenges we face. And by choosing forgiveness, we not only heal ourselves, but we also contribute to the healing of the world.
So beautifully put. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I invite you to consider what resonates most deeply with you. What practices or insights will you take with you into your daily life? What steps can you take today to cultivate greater forgiveness and compassion for yourself and for others?
Thank you for joining us on this transformative journey. We hope you've gained valuable insights and tools to help you navigate the complexities of forgiveness and to create a more peaceful and fulfilling life. Remember to stay curious, keep diving deep, and as always, may you find peace and healing in the transformative power of forgiveness.